Midnight. The Donetsk front. The fog is so thick that even thermal cameras are nearly blind. A Russian MTLB armored vehicle moves slowly forward. Inside, an assault team. The commander thinks this weather is a perfect opportunity. Drones can't fly, quadcopters can't see, Ukraine's defense lines may have collapsed, but only one thing is advancing, and that thing has no blood. And no pain. And no fear whatsoever. February 2022. When Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the vast majority of the world believed this war would be over in days, maybe weeks. Against Russia's artillery power, supply capacity, and sheer manpower, even Ukraine's ability to hold on was itself a question mark. 4 years have passed since that day, and Ukraine didn't just hold on. It reinvented war itself. What we're talking about today is something that many military analysts have called a historic turning point. Ukraine is no longer content with sending only soldiers and weapons to the front. Some of what it sends doesn't sleep, doesn't get tired, doesn't get hungry, and most importantly, doesn't die. A robot army. This is not a science fiction movie trailer. This is today's reality. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense confirmed in official statements, throughout 2025, every single unmanned ground vehicle, UGV, target was exceeded. Thousands of unmanned systems were deployed to the front beyond what was planned. And the figures projected for 2026 go far beyond even those numbers. So how did this begin? And why now? In the early days of the war, Ukraine didn't have enough manpower, enough weapons, enough supply routes. But it had one thing: creativity. And that creativity, over time, evolved into a defense technology ecosystem unlike anything the world had ever seen. The first step was taken with drones. Commercial quadcopters were initially used only for reconnaissance. Then someone asked, what if we attach explosives to these? And the age of FPV, first-person view, kamikaze drones began. Today, Ukraine has reached the capacity to launch up to 9,000 drones per day. Hold that number in your mind for a moment. 9,000 a day. 375 an hour. 6 every minute, but drone warfare has its own vulnerabilities. Russia rapidly developed electronic warfare systems. Jamming technologies that cut Ukraine's signal connections, knocked drones off course, and blind operators were deployed to the field. And at that point, Ukraine was forced to take the next step. If drones become useless when the signal is cut, you need a system that doesn't need a signal. And that is called an autonomous weapons system. AI-powered. Finds its own target. Determines its own route. Requires no human operator, or increasingly, less and less of one. This transition is not merely a technology upgrade. It is a paradigm shift that breaks new ground in the history of warfare. In mid-2024, Ukraine sent the world a subtle message. A fixed-wing mothership drone called the Gogol-M lifted off from an undisclosed location. With a 20-foot, roughly 6-meter, wingspan, this system penetrated up to 200 kilometers into Russian territory. And then, it released 2 attack drones from beneath it. These smaller systems flew at extremely low altitudes to evade radar detection. They autonomously scanned ground targets. Locked on. Struck. No one was piloting them. No one was selecting targets. The system itself was doing it. Human involvement was limited solely to what types of targets to engage and which area to search. But Ukraine wasn't satisfied with that either. In what became known as the Spider Web operation, planned over 18 months, Ukrainian agents transported drones and explosives deep into Russian territory. Russian truck drivers, unknowingly, carried these unmanned aerial vehicles to the vicinity of their targets. Then, remotely activated systems sprang into action. 4 air bases were targeted. A single swarm of 117 drones struck a base housing Russia's nuclear-capable long-range strategic bombers. This operation was neither merely a technological achievement nor just a military move. It was the manifesto of a new era. This revolution in the air has now moved to the ground. The UGV, Unmanned Ground Vehicle, was initially used in this war for logistics purposes. Small vehicles carrying ammunition, food, and water to the front lines. But why? The answer is simple, though painful. Pickups and armored carriers could be spotted by Russia's thermal optics from kilometers away. Every supply convoy was a target. Every driver faced death every single night. Yuri Peritsky, CEO of defense technology company DevDroid, recounted in a speech, "Soldiers used to say, either we do this mission today, or the guys at the zero line don't survive. No food, no water. That's why we did it. And now, robots do that job. Let the numbers speak." Throughout 2025, in Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade, 80% of logistics operations were carried out by UGVs. In heavily contested cities like Pokrovsk and Myrnograd, that figure reached 90%. In November 2025, the BBC reported that 90% of supply runs to frontline positions around Pokrovsk were being handled by UGVs. A single UGV can carry over 200 kilograms of cargo in one run. And throughout 2025, more than 15,000 UGVs were delivered to Ukrainian army units. To put that into perspective, in 2024, that number was only around 2,000. A 7-fold increase in a single year. Now we get to the real heart of it. Logistics is history. UGVs are now fighting. And here, let's go back to the beginning. December 10, 2025. The Donetsk front. Near Kostiantynivka. Heavy fog. When operators from Ukraine's 5th Kiev Assault Brigade realized FPV drones couldn't fly and quadcopters couldn't see in this weather, they deployed a different system. The Droid TW-12.7. This is a tracked unmanned ground vehicle armed with a 12.7mm caliber Browning heavy machine gun. It has an AI-assisted target tracking system. It has a thermal imaging camera. And most critically, its operator was sitting more than a kilometer away, at a safe location. As the Russian MTLB armored vehicle advanced along the road, it entered the Droid TW-12.7's preset fire zone. The operator detected the vehicle through the thermal camera. Target lock was achieved. 12.7mm rounds tore into the armored vehicle side. Both the crew and the assault team inside were neutralized. The damaged vehicle came to a halt just centimeters from the small tracked robot. The Ukrainian army officially recorded this event as the first documented combat instance of a Ukrainian ground robot destroying an enemy armored vehicle. For the first time. For the first time in history. And this was only the beginning. January 2026. The same frontline area. This time the Droid TW-7.62 model is in the field. Smaller caliber, but just as lethal. The operator encountered something different this time. 3 Russian soldiers emerged from a collapsed building, covered in blood. They dropped their weapons. And, they surrendered. But there was not a single human being on the other side's front. What they surrendered to was a robot. This footage circulated in world media that week. Time magazine, the Atlantic Council, the BBC, all covered the event under separate headlines. Because this moment was not merely a combat incident. It was something documented for the first time in all of humanity's history of war, human soldiers surrendering to an armed unmanned system. There is not a single article in the Geneva Conventions addressing this situation. Because no one had conceived that such a thing could happen. But it did. And we are compelled to ask, after this war is over, how much time will international law have to close this gap? March 2026. The BBC, citing military sources, announced a historic development. Ukraine's K2 Brigade established the world's first fully operational unmanned ground vehicle battalion. Commander, Major Alexander Afanasyev. The concept underlying this battalion works in complete opposition to classical infantry logic. A normal army battalion works like this: humans advance, vehicles provide support, heavy weapons are positioned at the rear. In the K2 battalion, the human is the support element. The primary combatant is the robot. Systems within the battalion carry Kalashnikov machine guns mounted on wheeled or tracked platforms. Explosive-laden kamikaze UGVs silently glide toward enemy positions and detonate there. Other systems pass through overpasses or trench lines to plant explosives. Afanasiev described these systems this way: they fire at places a soldier would be afraid to go. But a UGV is happy to risk its existence. Sit with the weight of that sentence for a moment. If a human soldier goes there, they die. If a robot goes, it's just repaired. Looking at production figures at this point clarifies the entire picture. Ukrainian defense technology company Tenkor produced more than 2,000 UGVs for the military throughout 2025. The company's director, Maxim Vasilchenko, expects demand for 2026 to reach 40,000 units. Between 10 and 15% of that total is planned to consist of armed systems. A simple calculation, taking a 12.5% average, approximately 5,000 armed UGVs are expected to be deployed in 2026. For comparison, the total number of T-34 tanks produced throughout all of World War II was approximately 84,000. And those tanks carried humans. They were built over decades. Ukraine is planning to deploy 5,000 armed robots in a single year. And the production ecosystem surrounding these robots is equally striking. According to the Brave One Defense Technology Innovation Platform, more than 270 Ukrainian companies are currently developing UGVs. With that figure, Ukraine holds the highest concentration of defense robotics firms of any country in the world. The necessity of war rapidly transformed into the world's most dynamic defense technology ecosystem. Mykola Zinkovich of Ukraine's 3rd Army Corps spoke about an operation conducted in the latter part of last year that is without precedent in military history. At a frontline position in eastern Ukraine, for 45 days, almost a month and a half, only one thing was present: a machine gun-equipped UGV. Serviced and reloaded every 48 hours, this system held the position entirely on its own for that entire period. Only the UGV system was at the position. That was the essence of the concept. Robots do not bleed. That sentence fundamentally changes the semantics of war. According to statements from the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces, robotic platforms reduce personnel casualties by up to 30%. That figure directly translates to more soldiers staying alive. And in this war, human life stands above everything else. Former Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces, now Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom, General Valery Zaluzhnyi, painted the following picture of the future during his address at the Chatham House think tank in London. In the near future, dozens and even hundreds of smarter and cheaper unmanned systems will attack simultaneously from different directions and altitudes, from the air, from the land, and from the sea. This is precisely where we arrive at perhaps the most critical question. How much say does artificial intelligence have in this war? Ukraine has long put the principle of human control front and center. Every armed UGV requires a human operator before it can fire. Systems can detect and track targets on their own, but the trigger finger remains human. Yet this line is growing increasingly fragile. Germany-based Helsing AI announced in December 2024 that it would deliver thousands of HX-2 Karma unmanned aerial vehicles to Ukraine. The defining feature of these systems: they are immune to electronic warfare countermeasures. Even if the signal is cut, the system can independently redetect its target and carry out the attack. It is tied to a human operator for critical decisions, but defining where a critical decision begins and ends is becoming an ever more ambiguous matter. Officials from within Ukraine's own military acknowledge this. A battery commander from the 33rd Separate Mechanized Brigade, known by the call sign Afghan, stated, robots can misidentify the wrong person or civilians. That's why the decision to fire is still with a human. But Russia's electronic warfare systems are working to eliminate that human factor. Every signal disruption, every jamming block, forces the system toward greater autonomy. The paradox is this. The more jamming Russia uses, the more autonomous Ukraine's systems are compelled to become. Why did this technology spread so fast? Part of the answer is purely economic. Ukrainian firms keep the cost of a UGV between 600,000 and 700,000 Ukrainian hryvnias, roughly $15,000 to $18,000. And the average UGV completes between 7 and 8 missions before being destroyed. Simple math, the cost per mission is approximately $2,000 to $2,300. The same as the cost of a single round fired by a Russian coastal battery. But this UGV carries a payload of 150 to 200 kilograms. Several times the maximum load an infantry soldier can carry. With zero risk. According to researchers at the Modern War Institute, Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade can carry over 200 kilograms of cargo per UGV. That's 10 times the maximum payload of even the most advanced Baba Yaga attack drone models, which max out at around 10 kilograms. The math is clear. These robots are coming. And they can no longer be stopped. Of course, this technological race isn't one-sided. Russia is also developing and deploying robotic systems. And cases of unmanned vehicles facing each other on the front lines are now being reported. Robot versus robot. In January 2026, a Russian courier UGV model was hit by a Ukrainian FPV drone. The irony, the courier model was specifically an anti-drone UGV, carrying an electronic warfare system designed to neutralize drones. An anti-drone robot was destroyed by a drone. Around the same time, Ukraine struck a robot factory being used by Russian forces in occupied Donetsk. This factory was concealed inside a building that had previously served as a Ford dealership. The strike caused stored ammunition to detonate, disrupting Russian robotic systems production. Russia is fully aware of this race. According to information relayed by independent analysts, Putin issued instructions to government agencies and leading banks to deepen AI cooperation with China. The Russian military has identified AI applications on the battlefield, intelligence analysis, threat prediction, target identification, as priority areas. Won't this race have a winner? It will. But who that winner will be is the most critical question of the next several years. Ukraine's strategic vision has now taken a sharply defined shape. According to security analysts from the Lowy Institute, the defensive architecture Kyiv is planning works on 3 levels. In the air, the drone wall. A layer of unmanned aerial systems constantly aloft, detecting and intercepting Russian strikes. Drones are estimated to be responsible for roughly 80% of Russian battlefield casualties today. On the ground, the robot shield. While soldiers shelter in underground positions, UGVs move along the front line, fire, and carry supplies. At sea. The naval drone fleet. Ukraine is the world's leader in this domain as well. AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles mounted on Magura, 7 naval drones shot down 2 Russian Su-30 fighter jets over the Black Sea in May 2025, the first documented case in history of a naval drone shooting down a combat aircraft. At the same time, the 28th Mechanized Brigade announced it had deployed the war's first air defense UGV. A remote-controlled ground robot carrying the 9K-38 Igla Manpad's guided missile system, capable of striking low-altitude aircraft and helicopters while keeping the crew safely out of harm's way. Air defense no longer depends solely on human beings. Behind all of these developments lies a systematic state policy. In spring 2023, Ukraine launched a defense technology cluster initiative called Brave One. This platform acts as a bridge connecting the private sector, the government, and the military. More than 200 AI-focused innovations are currently being pursued under the Brave One umbrella. What projects are among them? AI-assisted military intelligence systems like Griselda and Delta, which analyze photo and video data from drones in real time and relay it up the chain of command. Interceptor drones developed to destroy Russian Orlan and Zala reconnaissance drones, systems that have significantly disrupted Russia's precision strike capability. And electronic warfare systems. More than 140 electronic warfare manufacturers are currently operating in Ukraine. And the testing phase for these technologies is the real battlefield. Nowhere else in the world is there a defense technology testing environment operating this rapidly and this radically. Every system is tested on the real front, under real threats, in real time. And failing systems are replaced by far better ones within days. In March 2026, Time magazine published a striking piece. Ken LeBlanc, a former Marine with more than 300 combat deployments, is the CEO of Foundation, a company developing unmanned ground robots. He brought an armed unmanned system he calls the Phantom -1 Malawian Kwacha to Ukraine. And he says what he witnessed left him profoundly shaken. This is a robot war in the fullest sense, he said. The robot is the primary combatant, humans are the support element. This stands in complete contrast to my experience in Afghanistan. There, humans were everything and vehicles were supplementary. LeBlanc described what he saw on Ukrainian front lines, soldiers buried in trenches. Every time they step out, they face a drone strike. Movement itself is a risk. So they leave the movement to the robots. Seeing a human presence at the front is nearly impossible. Seeing robot presence is now the standard. This testimony says something very different from academic reports or defense ministry statements. Because LeBlanc is one of the most experienced combat specialists from one of the world's leading nations. And he says he has never been this stunned in his life. At this point, we need to take a step back and see the big picture. According to the position of Ukraine's armed forces, the final decision to fire on all armed systems rests with a human. This is both an ethical choice and a position taken within the framework of international humanitarian law. But real war doesn't unfold under ideal conditions. Russia's extended fiber-optic drones, systems that are nearly immune to signal jamming, are penetrating deep into Ukraine's rear areas. This disrupts Ukraine's supply lines and weakens defensive positions. In response, Ukraine has moved toward systems that are more resistant to electronic tracking and capable of operating more independently. In other words, the more jamming Russia uses, the more autonomously Ukraine systems are forced to operate. This spiral is not fully in anyone's control. The words of Izumi Nakamitsu, head of the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs, are striking in this context. Fully delegating to machines the authority to take a human life is morally reprehensible. It must be prohibited. This is the position of the United Nations. But the distance between that position and the reality of war grows a little wider with each passing day. What Ukraine has planned for 2026 has the potential to reshape the course of the war entirely. According to defense technology expert Yuri Paritsky's projection, by the end of 2026, the death zone, the area in which any movement is completely under threat, will expand from 20 kilometers to 50 kilometers. Meaning that up to 50 kilometers behind the front line, no human or vehicle will be able to move without robotic cover. At that point, the concept of war changes at its root. Paritsky puts it plainly, the first line will consist of robots alone. Humans will stay behind, to maintain, repair, replace. TENCOR Director Vasilchenko points to a far more advanced stage of unmanned systems. This will no longer be science fiction. Former Commander Zaluzny adds, in the near future, dozens and hundreds of smarter, cheaper unmanned systems will attack simultaneously from different directions. From the air, from the land, from the sea. Simultaneously. In a coordinated fashion. And what provides that coordination won't be a human. It will be artificial intelligence. What we have seen so far is only the beginning of that future. The NATO exercise Hedgehog 2025, held in Estonia in March 2025, laid bare a startling picture. The future is no longer at our doorstep, it is standing right in front of us. The scenes we witnessed during the Hedgehog 2025 exercise are the harbingers of a new era, one where we question not just the tools of war, but the very human nature of conflict itself. If the front lines are to consist solely of robots, how will this reshape global power dynamics and the course of human history? This is not merely a technical shift, it is the rewriting of strategy. If you want to know who will survive in this dark and technological future of modern warfare, stay tuned. In our next video, we will examine how these autonomous systems will shape global politics and what awaits us in a world ruled by AI generals. Do you think peace is possible in a world where robots do the fighting? Let's discuss in the comments below. Thanks for watching.